First Jews have settled in Latvia in the second half of 16th century. Some of them came from Polish and Lithuanian and Belarusian lands, while others were from Germany and Netherlands. Majority of the Jews would live in the countryside, serving the nobility, running inns and distilleries, mills and dairy farms, trading with all kinds of goods. Particularly important was timber trade and grain trade. In 19th century, majority of the Jews moved from the countryside to the cities, and by late 19th century, there were approximately 140,000 Jews on the territory of Latvia, and in many places, they would constitute the majority of the population. An interesting feature of Latvian Jewish community was the rather early arrival of Haskalah movement, the Enlightenment movement. Already in late 18th century, some of the Jews from Duchy of Kurland, from Western Latvia, would go to study in German universities and would return with new ideas and approaches. Among them were also some people who worked with Moses Mendelssohn, the famous German Jewish philosopher. In early 19th century, Latvia would become one of the laboratories for modernization of the Jews in Russian Empire, and in 1840 was established the first communal secular Jewish school in Russian Empire in Riga. It was led by Max Lilienthal, a prominent Jewish enlightenor and public figure. Later, he would be advisor to the Russian Ministry of Education in Jewish matters. Later on, he would travel to the United States and would become one of the leading American Jewish figures. By late 19th century, also the branch of Society of Jewish Education was established in Riga. It was a major Russian imperial Jewish educational organization. Riga branch would be self-sustainable. It would run several endowments, as we would say today. They would be providing grants to Jewish students, and their major project was the Jewish craft school that did not only teach crafts, which was an important way to give a source of income for the Jewish youth, but also they would have a very good program in humanities and in Jewish culture. Our museum has a big collection of private photos coming from family archives, and we still continue receiving them. Sometimes we even manage to match two different branches of the family that left Latvia 100 years ago. And of course, an important thing we see that visually in late 19th and late 20th century, Jews were not so different from surrounding population. When we speak of traditional Jewish society, still religion plays an important role. And when speaking of religious life as a model community, we chose the town of Bauska in southern Latvia, partially because its synagogue was listed in 1931 as a National Heritage Site, and we have a big collection of photos. Particularly, it was famous for its Aron Kodesh, and we made a replica, one small fragment. It's a full-size replica, and you can imagine how splendid it was. We hope that someday we'll be able to fully recreate it. Also, Bauska was famous as a place where several prominent rabbis officiated, among them Abraham Yitzchak Kook. Of course, synagogues you could find in many towns, bigger ones and small ones. Also, Latvia was home to many prominent rabbis, including two Daugavpils rabbis, Meir Simcha and Yosef Rosen, called the Rogachover genius. Speaking of economic activities, we have to remember that in the 19th century happened a very strong stratification of the Jewish society. And of course, there were Jews who were becoming richer, especially those who entered the new spheres of economic life. Like, for example, Louis Hirschman, who owned the safety match company Vulcan, one of the biggest companies in Russian Empire. And of course, there was a strong Jewish middle class. But more and more Jews were becoming poor, especially in the 1880s, when they were prohibited to live in the countryside. They had to resettle to the cities. And when we read that in one or another town, the Jews own the majority of the businesses, we have to remember how most of the businesses would look like. Early 20th century was also the period of political turmoil. In 1905 started the revolution, and during the revolution, Latvian and Jewish social democrats would closely work together, forming so-called joint committees, publishing leaflets, and this cooperation would continue up to 1950s. Then, in 1914 comes the First World War, which was very calamitous for all of Latvia and particularly for the Jews. Many people became refugees, many people were evacuated with industries where they worked. Of course, many people would be conscripted to Russian army, but the Jews were also expelled by Russian authorities. 30 to 40,000 people from Western Latvia in the course of 2 days were forced into the trains, and sent to Riga, and through Riga they went to what is nowadays central Ukraine. If there were about 180,000 Jews on territory of Latvia on the eve of the war, there were only 80,000 after the First World War.